Hey everyone, it's Ed Gutowski, and what I wanted to do was to create a short video in which I kind of talk a little bit about Shakespeare and Henry V, because we're going to kind of end class with Shakespeare and Henry V. And one of the things I really want you to know is I do not expect you guys to be experts at Shakespeare. I don't expect you to easily understand the play, but it is a great play, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make it as easy as possible. And so look, one of the things about Henry V, and I've taught it before, I've taught it online with really great success, even for students who say, it's hard reading Shakespeare or it's hard to read online, and I really want to kind of just make it even easier for our class. But Henry V, the reason I chose it for a class is because it is epic. So it is a play about rhetoric, it is a play about war, and it is a play about politics. And it is, I think it's the perfect play if you really want to look at how rhetoric works. So what I wanted to do was for this week, was to kind of just imagine that you're creating a blockbuster Hollywood movie, and you're going to cast a bunch of characters based on the descriptions I've listed in Canvas, but I'm also going to give you some background here. And then I'm also going to give you some background to kind of the first act, because the first part of the act can seem a little bit confusing, but once you get over that, the story has a pretty straightforward line, and it's kind of easy to follow. So essentially, what you have to understand, is the play is called Henry V. And Henry V, it starts, he's just taken power. And Henry is this young, inexperienced king, and he decides to go to war in France. And so you want to have a little bit of a background, because the Shakespeare history plays, they're kind of a trilogy. So you want to have just a little bit of background about Henry before you kind of read it. So before Henry becomes king, in Henry IV, Part 1 and Part 2, Henry is known as Hal, and he's going to be heir to the king, but Hal is really kind of reckless, He spends a lot of time in the pubs, he drinks a lot of beer, and he is just lots of fun. And the British people love Hal. They think the world of him, because here it is, Hal is hanging out with the common man, He's hanging out in the pubs, and they think he's one of them. And Hal is hanging out with some of the common people, and you're going to hear it very briefly mentioned in the play. He's hanging out with this big fat knight called Falstaff. And Falstaff, who will die at the start of our play, Falstaff is loads of fun. He is hilarious. He's the kind of guy you would want to hang out. And when Falstaff and Hal get together, the British people just love it. They think it's funny. They think it's great. And meanwhile, the king, Henry IV, is looking at his son going, what the hell is wrong with my son? He's going to be heir to the throne, and yet he's out there drinking in the pubs, having fun, and then he's going to be heir to the throne. And I think there's a misreading of Hal, because what Hal is doing is he's getting to know how the common people think. So by hanging out in the pubs, he knows how the common man thinks, and that's going to benefit him when he is king. And the problem is, is that because people think they're so close to Hal, they think when he becomes in power, he'll put his friends in power. And so there's a great scene at the end of Henry IV, Part 2, when Hal has become king, and he's going into Parliament, and Falstaff runs in front of the crowd. And remember, the crowd loves Hal. Right now, our king, he's the people's king. And all of a sudden, Falstaff runs up and he says, "Oh, my friend Hal, oh, Henry." And Henry looks at him and says, "I know thee not, old man." And Hal is kind of shocked, because he realizes now that Hal has become king, he's lost his best friend, and he's going to have no position in the British monarchy. So it also, I think, benefits Henry, because when Henry gets into power, he's going to decide to go to war with France, and he's going to need the British people's support for it. So Hal and Henry V are kind of a complex character. So I want you to imagine who you think you would cast as Hal or Henry. We'll call him Henry now that he's king, but Yeah, and you have to remember, he's a young king, he's inexperienced, he's kind of cocky, and when he gets into power, he decides to go to war with France. And that's basically, you're going to see how he uses rhetoric to do that. Now, when we start getting into Act 1 at the start might be a little confusing because the play starts off and everyone knows that Henry's just become king, and the church knows that Henry is king. And they're worried because, hey, here's this kid that was reckless, that was wild, that was drinking in the pubs. Who is this guy? But they know they want something from Henry. What they want is they want a big tax break for some land, but they don't know if they can trust Henry. And at the same time, Henry knows this. So it's genius because he knows that the church wants something from him. And he also knows that he needs their support to go to war. So when that first sign comes up, it can kind of be confusing. But what you're going to see is that Henry is using rhetoric against the church to gain their support to go to war. In order to gain that support, he's going to kind of play them and say, oh, I'll support your tax cuts, but you guys need to justify my effort to going to war. So that's kind of your first spoiler when you start. And everything after that will get a lot easier, and I will guide you through the play. Now, also, there's a couple other things I want you to imagine. I think I have a list of 7 characters I want you to cast. What you're going to do is you're just going to have a short description of each one of the characters. I think I've listed 7 of them. And you don't have to read the play. I just want you to tell me, based on the descriptions, why did you pick that character and why? So one of them is obviously Henry V. One of them is the Dauphin, and he is the Prince of France, and he's the one that Henry will meet on the battlefield. And so he's kind of Henry's rival, but he again underestimates Henry, thinks Henry is inexperienced, thinks Henry is kind of a fool. The other person I'll be interested to see is I want you to cast Catherine, because she'll become the love interest in the play. And I'm going to argue that Catherine is a really strong female character, that Shakespeare did in fact create strong female characters, and that she's the one that will end up speaking truth to power. I think there are like about 7 other characters. I listed about 7 characters. So I want you to, just tell me who you'd cast. Don't have to read the play yet, based on the descriptions, why. And then I'm going to list a couple of film versions that you can watch, because they'll help you, and there'll be a paper topic. There's some great film versions, and kind of just help us to get acclimated to the play. So I'm super excited. I'm jazzed to see what you think of Henry V, and then we'll start getting that into that next week.